The sleek, ebony fence stood tall and impenetrable, a bold statement of John's fierce independence in the sea of conformity that was Willow Oaks Estates. But for HOA President Karen Weston, it was an eyesore that defied the neighborhood's pristine aesthetic. With a sense of unbridled entitlement, Karen barged into John's backyard, her lackeys in tow. "This fence has to go," she declared, her voice dripping with disdain. "It's an atrocity, a blight on our community." John's jaw tightened as he faced the formidable woman, her manicured nails and pressed pantsuit a stark contrast to his weathered hands and casual attire. "This fence is perfectly within regulations," he retorted, his eyes narrowing. Karen's lips curled into a menacing smile. "Oh, I beg to differ. You see, we've made a few adjustments to the rules. And now your fence is in violation. You will have it lowered or face the consequences." Rage burned in John's chest, but he knew better than to challenge the HOA's tyrannical ways. With a heavy heart, he watched as his meticulously crafted barrier was dismantled, his sense of privacy and security crumbling along with it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting ominous shadows across the impeccably manicured lawns, John retreated to his now exposed backyard, his mind racing with thoughts of retaliation. Little did he know, the true test of his resolve was about to begin. The night was still and silent, save for the occasional hoot of an owl. John had just settled into his favorite armchair, a steaming mug of coffee in hand, when a sudden movement in the shadows caught his eye. Adrenaline surging, he stepped outside, only to witness a shadowy figure scaling the fence and disappearing into the darkness beyond. Panic gripped John's heart as he rushed back inside, fumbling for his phone to call the police. But before he could dial, a bone-chilling scream pierced the air, a sound he recognized all too well. Karen. John raced toward the source of the commotion, his mind a whirlwind of possibilities. Had the intruder targeted the HOA president? As he neared Karen's immaculate home, the scene that unfolded before him was nothing short of a nightmare. The front door hung open, and through the entryway, John could see Karen huddled on the floor, her designer blouse torn, her makeup smeared, and a look of sheer terror etched on her face. Beside her, a masked figure stood, a glint of metal in his hand. "Get back!" The intruder barked, his voice distorted by the fabric covering his face. John's heart pounded in his chest as he weighed his options. Should he risk his own safety to confront the thief, or retreat and wait for the authorities? The decision was taken from him as the intruder's gaze locked onto him, the blade in his hand poised for action. Trapped in a web of his own HOA's making, John braced himself for the unthinkable, praying that help would arrive in time to avert the impending disaster. The masked intruder's steely gaze fixed on John, the blade in his hand glinting in the dim light. John's heart raced as he weighed his options. Should he risk his own safety to confront the thief, or retreat and wait for the authorities? Before he could decide, the intruder barked, "Get back!" His voice, distorted by the fabric covering his face, sent a chill down John's spine. Trapped in the web of his own HOA's making, John braced himself for the unthinkable, praying that help would arrive in time to avert the impending disaster. Suddenly, the sound of sirens pierced the air, cutting through the tense silence. The intruder's head snapped toward the front door, and without a moment's hesitation, he bolted, disappearing into the night. John rushed to Karen's side, his hands trembling as he helped her to her feet. She was shaken, her designer blouse still torn and her makeup smeared, but physically unharmed. "What happened?" John asked, his voice laced with concern. Karen's eyes were wild, her usually composed demeanor shattered. He broke in," she stammered. "I heard a noise, and when I came to investigate, he was ransacking my home. I tried to stop him, but he overpowered me." John's brow furrowed as he processed the information. Something about Karen's story didn't quite add up. But before he could press her further, the police arrived, swarming the scene. As the officers questioned Karen and combed the house for evidence, John couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Why had the intruder targeted Karen's home specifically? And why had the HOA president been so adamant about him lowering his fence? A decision that now seemed to have put him in harm's way. John's mind raced with possibilities, each more sinister than the last. He knew that something wasn't right, and he was determined to get to the bottom of it, even if it meant challenging the very powers that ruled over Willow Oaks estates. As the sun rose on the aftermath of the break-in, John steeled himself for the battle ahead, his resolve hardening like steel. He would not rest until he uncovered the truth, no matter the cost. The sound of sirens had sent the masked intruder fleeing into the night, leaving a shaken Karen in his wake. As the police officers questioned the HOA president and combed her home for evidence, John couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Why had the intruder targeted Karen's house specifically? And why had she been so adamant about him lowering his fence? A decision that now seemed to have put him in harm's way. As the sun rose on the aftermath of the break-in, John steeled himself for the battle ahead, his resolve hardening like steel. He would not rest until he uncovered the truth, no matter the cost. Determined to uncover the hidden motives at play, John began to dig deeper, scouring public records and reaching out to his neighbors. What he discovered only served to deepen the mystery. It seemed that Karen's tenure as HOA president had been marked by a series of questionable decisions and suspicious financial transactions. Homeowners who had dared to challenge her authority had found themselves the targets of increasingly aggressive tactics, ranging from hefty fines to outright harassment. John's blood boiled as he pieced together the pattern of abuse and corruption. The HOA, an entity meant to maintain the community's standards, had become a tool of oppression, a corrupt powerhouse that trampled on the rights of its own residents. Fueled by a righteous anger, John knew he had to act. He began rallying his neighbors, sharing his findings, and calling for a community-wide revolt against the HOA's tyrannical reign. Slowly but surely, a groundswell of support began to build, as homeowners from across Willow Oaks estates joined the fight. But Karen was not about to go down without a fight. As the momentum of the rebellion grew, she unleashed her legal arsenal, filing a barrage of lawsuits and threatening dire consequences for those who dared to defy her. The battle lines were drawn, and the stakes had never been higher. John knew that he was up against a formidable foe, one who would stop at nothing to maintain her grip on power. But with the unwavering support of his neighbors, he was determined to prevail, no matter the cost. As the groundswell of support for John's rebellion against the HOA's corruption grew, Karen launched a relentless legal assault, filing a barrage of lawsuits and threatening dire consequences for those who dared to defy her. The battle lines were drawn, and the stakes had never been higher. John knew he was up against a formidable foe, one who would stop at nothing to maintain her grip on power. But with the unwavering support of his neighbors, he was determined to prevail, no matter the cost. Undeterred, John continued to dig deeper, uncovering more evidence of Karen's malfeasance. He discovered that the HOA's finances were a tangled web of misappropriated funds, with Karen and her inner circle lining their pockets at the expense of the community. Armed with this damning information, John organized a town hall meeting, rallying his fellow homeowners to confront Karen and demand her resignation. The atmosphere was electric, as residents who had long suffered under the HOA's heavy-handed rule finally found their voice. Karen, however, was not about to relinquish her power without a fight. She arrived at the meeting flanked by her legal team, ready to unleash a barrage of threats and intimidation tactics. "This rebellion will not be tolerated," she hissed, her eyes narrowing. "I have the full backing of the HOA board, and we will use every legal means at our disposal to crush this insurrection." John stood his ground, undaunted by Karen's blustering. "The people have spoken, Karen," he declared, his voice clear and unwavering. "Your reign of terror is over. It's time for you and your cronies to step down. The tension in the room was palpable as the two sides faced off, each determined to emerge victorious. But just as the confrontation threatened to boil over, a startling revelation came to light. One of the homeowners, a meek and unassuming retiree named Mrs. Wilkins, stood up and, with a trembling voice, revealed that she had been the one to call the police on the night of the break-in at Karen's house. Her confession stunned the room, as she detailed how she had witnessed the entire incident from her window and how Karen's story had been a fabrication. The revelation sent shockwaves through the community as the true nature of Karen's corruption became painfully clear. John seized the moment, rallying the crowd to demand a full investigation into the HOA's practices, as well as Karen's immediate removal from her position. The battle was far from over, but in that moment, the tide had turned. John knew that he and his fellow homeowners were on the cusp of victory, a triumph that would reverberate through the very foundations of Willow Oaks Estates. The revelations from Mrs. Wilkins, the meek retiree who had witnessed the break-in at Karen's house, sent shockwaves through the Willow Oaks Estates community. Her confession that Karen's story had been a fabrication laid bare the true nature of the HOA president's corruption. Seizing the moment, John rallied the homeowners to demand a full investigation into the HOA's practices, as well as Karen's immediate removal from her position. The tide had turned, and John knew that he and his fellow residents were on the cusp of victory, a triumph that would reverberate through the very foundations of their neighborhood. However, Karen was not about to go down without a fight. Realizing that her house of cards was crumbling, she launched a desperate last-ditch effort to cling to power. Leveraging her connections within the local government, Karen filed a series of strategic lawsuits, seeking to have the town hall meeting declared invalid and the investigation into the HOA's activities halted. She even went so far as to threaten to have the entire neighborhood's property values plummet if the residents continued their rebellion. John and his allies were undeterred. They countered Karen's legal maneuvers with their own, retaining a team of skilled attorneys who were well versed in the intricacies of HOA law. The courtroom battles raged on, with both sides desperate to gain the upper hand. As the conflict escalated, tensions within the community reached a boiling point. Neighbors who had once been cordial now eyed each other with suspicion, uncertain of who was loyal to the HOA and who had thrown their support behind John's resistance. The stress took a toll on everyone involved, as sleepless nights and endless strategy sessions became the norm. John found himself increasingly isolated as Karen used her influence to turn some of his former allies against him. But just when it seemed that all hope was lost, a crucial piece of evidence surfaced: a financial ledger that detailed the HOA's illicit activities, including the funneling of funds into Karen's personal accounts. This bombshell revelation was the final nail in the coffin for the embattled HOA president. With her lies and corruption exposed for all to see, Karen's power crumbled. The community rallied behind John, and the HOA was forced to undergo a complete overhaul, with new leadership and a renewed commitment to serving the needs of the homeowners. In the aftermath of the hard-fought battle, John emerged as a reluctant hero, celebrated by his neighbors for his unwavering determination and unyielding pursuit of justice. The victory, however, was bittersweet, as the scars of the conflict would linger for years to come. The revelation of the financial ledger, which detailed the HOA's illicit activities and the funneling of funds into Karen's personal accounts, proved to be the final nail in the coffin for the embattled HOA president. With her lies and corruption exposed for all to see, Karen's power crumbled. The community rallied behind John, and the HOA was forced to undergo a complete overhaul, with new leadership and a renewed commitment to serving the needs of the homeowners. In the aftermath of the hard-fought battle, John emerged as a reluctant hero, celebrated by his neighbors for his unwavering determination and unyielding pursuit of justice. However, the victory was bittersweet, as the scars of the conflict would linger for years to come. The once idyllic Willow Oaks Estates had been irreparably transformed, its once pristine streets now tinged with the lingering mistrust and resentment that had festered during the power struggle. As the new HOA board worked to rebuild the community's reputation and restore faith in the organization, John found himself at the center of a different kind of battle, one for the hearts and minds of his fellow homeowners. Some saw him as a savior, a champion of their rights, while others viewed him as a troublemaker who had needlessly disrupted the delicate balance of their neighborhood. The divisions ran deep, and John knew that mending the wounds would be an uphill battle. Undeterred, he dove headfirst into the task, working tirelessly to bridge the gaps and foster a sense of unity among his neighbors. It was a slow and arduous process, but slowly the community began to heal, their shared experiences forging a newfound sense of camaraderie. Just as the dust was starting to settle, however, a startling discovery came to light. During the investigation into the HOA's finances, a hidden trail of evidence had emerged, leading directly to the door of a powerful local politician with deep ties to the community. The implications were staggering. The corruption that had plagued Willow Oaks Estates extended far beyond the HOA's walls, reaching into the very heart of the town's power structure. John knew that exposing this web of deceit would be a monumental challenge, but he was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. As he prepared to take on this new battle, John couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him to this point. What had started as a simple dispute over a fence had morphed into a high-stakes war for the very soul of his community. And now, the stakes had never been higher. As the dust began to settle in the aftermath of the HOA power struggle, a startling discovery came to light. During the investigation into the organization's finances, a hidden trail of evidence had emerged, leading directly to the door of a powerful local politician with deep ties to the community. The implications were staggering. The corruption that had plagued Willow Oaks Estates extended far beyond the HOA's walls, reaching into the very heart of the town's power structure. John knew that exposing this web of deceit would be a monumental challenge, but he was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. As he prepared to take on this new battle, John couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him to this point. What had started as a simple dispute over a fence had morphed into a high-stakes war for the very soul of his community, and now the stakes had never been higher. Undeterred, John rallied his allies, both old and new, to uncover the full extent of the corruption. They pored over financial records, interviewed witnesses, and pieced together a complex web of political favors, backroom deals, and illicit payments. The more they uncovered, the more John realized the depth of the problem. The local politician, a respected figure in the community, had been using the HOA as a front for his own nefarious activities, funneling money into his own pockets and those of his allies. As John and his team prepared to go public with their findings, they faced a barrage of threats and intimidation tactics. The politician's allies moved quickly to discredit the investigation, painting John and his supporters as disgruntled troublemakers. But John refused to be silenced. He knew that the future of Willow Oaks Estates hung in the balance, and he was determined to see this fight through to the end, no matter the personal cost. Rallying the community once again, John held a series of town hall meetings, meticulously laying out the evidence of the politician's corruption. The revelations were met with a mixture of shock, anger, and determination, as the residents of Willow Oaks Estates realized the full extent of the betrayal they had suffered. The backlash was swift and unforgiving. The politician and his allies launched a fierce counterattack, using their considerable influence to try and undermine John's credibility and shut down the investigation. But John refused to back down, his resolve only growing stronger with each new obstacle. As the battle lines were drawn, the community found itself at a crossroads. Would they succumb to the corrupting influence of power, or would they stand united and fight for the future they deserved? The outcome hung in the balance, with John and his allies poised to deliver the final, decisive blow. As the battle lines were drawn, the community of Willow Oaks Estates found itself at a crossroads. Would they succumb to the corrupting influence of power, or would they stand united and fight for the future they deserved? The outcome hung in the balance, with John and his allies poised to deliver the final, decisive blow. Undeterred by the relentless attacks from the local politician and his allies, John continued to rally the community, his unwavering determination fueling the growing momentum of the resistance. He knew that the fate of Willow Oaks Estates rested squarely on their shoulders, and he was determined to see this fight through to the end. The town hall meetings became the epicenter of the conflict as John and his team methodically laid out the evidence of the politicians' corruption, exposing the web of deceit that had ensnared the very fabric of the community. The revelations were met with a mixture of shock, anger, and a renewed sense of purpose as the residents of Willow Oaks Estates realized the full extent of the betrayal they had suffered. As the pressure mounted, the politician and his allies launched a last-ditch effort to silence John and his supporters. They wielded their considerable influence to discredit the investigation, flooding the airwaves and social media with a barrage of propaganda and smear campaigns. But John and his team refused to be cowed. They doubled down on their efforts, harnessing the power of the community to counter the politicians' attacks. Grassroots movements sprang up, with homeowners banding together to support the cause and expose the truth. The battle raged on, with both sides fighting tooth and nail for the future of Willow Oaks Estates. The stakes had never been higher, and the outcome hung in the balance, with the community's very soul hanging in the balance. In the end, it was the unwavering determination and sheer force of will of John and his allies that tipped the scales. Their relentless pursuit of justice, coupled with the overwhelming support of the community, proved to be too much for the corrupt politician and his cronies to withstand. As the dust settled, a new era dawned for Willow Oaks Estates. The HOA was dismantled, its power structures dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up, with a renewed focus on serving the needs of the homeowners. The local politician, his corruption exposed for all to see, was forced to step down in disgrace, his once formidable influence reduced to ashes. John, the reluctant hero who had spearheaded the fight, emerged from the conflict as a symbol of hope and resilience. His story would be told and retold, inspiring others to stand up against the forces of corruption and oppression that threatened to undermine the very fabric of their communities. The battle for Willow Oaks Estates may have been won, but the war for justice and accountability would continue to rage on. And John, with the unwavering support of his neighbors, would be there to lead the charge, his unwavering determination and unyielding spirit guiding the way.